Okay, so it's late. The office is dark except for the glow of a few monitors still humming with code, simulations, and data. Most people assume that nights like this are my favorite, the quiet hours when the world is asleep and I'm free to think about the future. And to be honest, they used to be. There was a time when this felt like the pinnacle of existence, leading teams that build rockets to Mars, designing systems that could reshape how humanity uses energy, pushing the boundaries of what's possible. I had everything I thought I wanted: the companies, the recognition, the influence. People looked at my life and called it a dream. But as I sit here now, staring at a screen filled with numbers and trajectories, I feel something I can't quite explain. It's not sadness, not exactly. It's more like a subtle ache, a quiet emptiness that all the achievements in the world can't seem to fill. I should feel proud. By most metrics, I've made it. The world calls me a visionary. My work is changing industries, inspiring millions, shaping the future. And yet, somewhere deep inside, there's this persistent whisper: is this really it? I've spent decades chasing progress, solving problems, building solutions to challenges humanity hasn't even fully defined yet. And every time I reach a new milestone, I think, this is the one that will finally satisfy me. But it never does. The satisfaction fades, replaced by an even deeper hunger for the next breakthrough, the next achievement, the next mountain to climb. I keep telling myself that meaning is just one more success away. But what if it's not? What if all the success in the world can't answer the question that keeps me awake at night? I don't talk about this much. People wouldn't understand. They see the headlines, the launches, the innovations, and they assume that must be enough. But tonight, as I sit here surrounded by the very things I once believed would give my life meaning, I can't shake the feeling that I've built an empire on foundations that don't reach deep enough. Something is missing, and I'm starting to wonder if it's been missing all along. It started as a faint whisper, a passing thought that I could easily ignore, but over time, it's grown louder, impossible to silence. For years, I've measured my life by the problems I've solved. I've told myself that if I could push humanity forward, make life multiplanetary, solve climate change, harness the power of artificial intelligence, then I'd have done something truly meaningful. But lately, I've started to question whether any of that actually answers the deeper questions that haunt me. We've built machines that think, networks that connect billions, and technologies that were once considered science fiction, and yet, people still feel lonely, nations still go to war, families still fall apart. I can optimize code, but I can't optimize the human heart. I can launch rockets, but I can't launch peace into someone's soul. These realizations don't come with a dramatic breakdown or a single defining moment. They arrive quietly, in the silence after a major product launch, in the hollow applause after another record-breaking milestone, in the long nights when sleep won't come, no matter how exhausted I am. I find myself staring out the window at the stars, wondering why I still feel incomplete. Why does it feel like, despite everything we've achieved, we're still missing the point? And why, despite everything I've achieved, I'm still searching for something I can't name? People often assume that purpose is a byproduct of success. That meaning will naturally emerge once you reach a certain level of impact. But I'm starting to suspect it's the other way around, that without purpose, success is just noise. Impressive, yes, but ultimately hollow. And the more I build, the more I realize that none of it will ever be enough on its own. There's a deeper problem, not in our technology, but in ourselves. And no algorithm, no invention, no grand human project can solve it. The cracks are showing. I can see them now in everything I've built, and they all point back to the same haunting question. What if the answer I'm looking for isn't something I can create? I don't know exactly when it happened, but somewhere along the way, the weight of it all became too much to carry. It wasn't a single catastrophic event. No scandal, no public failure, no spectacular collapse. It was slower than that, quieter, like water wearing away stone. The constant pressure, the relentless pace, the never-ending pursuit of the next impossible goal started eroding something deep inside me. At first, I called it fatigue, then I called it stress. Eventually, I had to admit it was something bigger. It was burnout. Not just physical, but existential. I remember one night in particular. We had just completed a launch that the world was calling a historic success. Headlines praised the innovation, investors were ecstatic, The team was celebrating. But instead of joining them, I slipped away early and drove home in silence. I should have been elated. Instead, I felt nothing. Not pride, not joy, not even relief. Just emptiness. I walked into my house, a place most people would envy, filled with everything money can buy, and it felt hollow. I stood there in the middle of the living room, surrounded by the artifacts of success, and realized I didn't care about any of it. None of it brought me peace. None of it gave me meaning. I'd spent years chasing metrics, market caps, launch windows, quarterly reports, technological milestones, but the truth hit me hard that night. None of those things could fill the growing void inside me. I'd built my identity on achievement, but now those achievements felt like sand slipping through my fingers. That night, for the first time in a long time, I didn't open my laptop. I didn't plan the next project or calculate the next milestone. I just sat in the dark, staring into nothing, and asked myself a question I'd been avoiding for years. What if this isn't what life is really about? It was terrifying, because if the life I'd built, the life I thought was the ultimate goal, wasn't enough, then what was? That moment wasn't dramatic, but it was decisive. I knew I couldn't keep going like this. Something had to change, and before I could figure out what that was, I needed to stop, to pause, to finally face the questions I'd been running from. The pause started as a weekend off, then stretched into weeks of restless nights and long, silent walks. Without the constant noise of work to distract me, the questions I'd buried for years began to surface. What's the point of building rockets if the people inside them are still lost? What's the purpose of advancing artificial intelligence if we don't understand our own souls? What good is sustainable energy if we're not sustaining each other? I tried to answer those questions the only way I knew how, with research, logic, and reason. I read books on philosophy, diving into the wisdom of thinkers who had wrestled with life's meaning long before I was born. I explored science more deeply than ever, searching for answers in the cosmos, in the origins of consciousness, in the fundamental laws of nature. I even studied different religions, not because I believed, but because I was desperate to understand why billions of people place their hope in something beyond themselves. But no matter how much knowledge I consumed, the longing remained. It wasn't an intellectual hunger anymore. It was something deeper, something in my soul crying out for a truth that data couldn't provide. Late one night, I found myself sitting alone in my study, lights off, the hum of the city muted beyond the glass. I'd run out of questions to ask and books to read, and for the first time in my life, I felt completely powerless. That's when I did something I never imagined I would. I prayed. It wasn't eloquent or rehearsed. In fact, it barely qualified as a prayer at all. It was more like a whisper, a desperate, hesitant experiment. God, I said into the silence, if you're real, show me. I didn't expect an answer. Part of me didn't even believe one would come. But in that small, trembling moment, something shifted. For the first time, I stopped trying to engineer the solution and started opening myself to the possibility that the solution might come from beyond me. I didn't know it then, but that simple, reluctant prayer was the beginning of a journey that would change everything. I didn't expect anything to happen after that night. Honestly, I assumed my prayer would dissolve into the void like a signal lost in deep space. Days went by, then weeks, and life went on mostly as usual. Meetings, projects, launches. But something subtle had shifted. The questions that once tormented me were still there, but they no longer felt like accusations. They felt like invitations. And then one night, everything changed. It was late, long past midnight, and I was alone in my study again. I wasn't reading, I wasn't thinking about work. I was just sitting there in the quiet, staring at the faint reflection of my own face in the dark window. That's when it happened. I felt it before I understood it. A presence, as real as the chair I was sitting in, yet completely beyond anything I'd ever experienced. It wasn't visible. It didn't speak with words, but it was there, and it knew me. Every success and failure, every dream and fear, every question I'd never dared to voice aloud. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I needed to prove anything. I didn't need to perform or justify or achieve. I just needed to be. There was love in that presence, not the kind that comes and goes depending on your performance, but the kind that has always existed and always will. It was deeper than logic, more certain than data, and somehow, without a single word spoken, I knew who it was: Jesus. Not an abstract idea, not a figure from history or theology, the real, living Jesus, not standing in judgment over me, but inviting me closer. In that moment, everything I thought I knew about God began to unravel. I had always imagined that if God existed, he would be looking for perfection, flawless execution, spotless morality, endless accomplishments. But here was Jesus, offering none of that and asking for none of it. All he wanted was surrender. Not the surrender of ambition or intellect, but the surrender of control, the willingness to admit that I wasn't enough on my own. It wasn't a dramatic moment. There were no visions, no voices from the sky. It was simple, quiet, and deeply real. But it was the most important moment of my life, because in that silence, I realized that I didn't need to reach God. He had already come to meet me right where I was. The encounter left me shaken in ways I didn't anticipate. It wasn't fear, it was weight. The kind of weight that comes when you know you're standing at a crossroads, and whichever path you choose will change everything. Following Jesus wasn't going to be a side project, something I could add to my already crowded schedule like another company or initiative. It would mean reordering everything, my priorities, my ambitions, even the way I defined success. And that terrified me. What would people think? My entire identity had been built on logic, science, and relentless forward motion. If I suddenly started talking about faith in Jesus, would they dismiss me as delusional? Would investors back away? Would friends distance themselves? These questions haunted me in the days that followed, but underneath the fear, there was a quiet conviction I couldn't shake. The same voice that had spoken to my heart in the darkness kept reminding me, this is the truth you've been searching for. And if it was true, how could I walk away just to protect my reputation? There was another cost, too, one far more personal. Following Jesus meant letting go of the illusion of control. It meant admitting that no matter how brilliant my ideas or how powerful my influence, I was not the author of my own story. That's a hard truth for someone who spent his entire life trying to bend reality to his will. But the more I resisted, the clearer it became. Clinging to control was what had kept me empty all along. Letting go wasn't weakness, it was freedom. So I made a decision. Not a dramatic announcement, not a grand gesture, just a quiet, resolute choice in the depths of my heart. I would follow Jesus, no matter the cost. The fear didn't disappear overnight, the questions didn't vanish, but beneath them all was a peace I had never known before, the kind that doesn't depend on circumstances or public opinion. And once I'd tasted that peace, there was no turning back. My old life, the one built on achievement, control, and self-sufficiency, was over. Something new had begun, and I was ready to see where it would lead. In the days and weeks after I made the decision to follow Jesus, something strange began to happen. It wasn't that my work stopped mattering or that my ambitions suddenly disappeared. Rockets still needed to launch, vehicles still needed to be built, and the future still demanded bold solutions. But for the first time, those things no longer defined me. My sense of worth wasn't tied to a quarterly report or a stock price. My value wasn't dependent on headlines or accolades. Success, I began to realize, wasn't about being first or being the best. It was about being faithful. That shift was subtle at first. I'd still walk into meetings, still set ambitious goals, still challenge my teams to reach beyond what anyone thought was possible. But beneath it all was a new question guiding everything I did. Why? Why build this technology? Why chase this breakthrough? Why push humanity forward? If the answer was ego, competition, or legacy, it suddenly felt hollow. But if the answer was love, love for people, for the planet, for the generations that would come after us, then the work carried eternal significance. That realization changed everything. Projects that once felt like monuments to human ingenuity began to look more like missions, opportunities to serve a purpose bigger than myself. A rocket launch wasn't just about reaching Mars, it was about expanding the horizons of what humanity could achieve together. Sustainable energy wasn't just about profits or market share, it was about stewardship, caring for a world entrusted to us. Even the smallest decisions, the ones that seemed inconsequential, became moments of worship when done with the right heart. And here's the thing, I still work hard, I still dream big. Following Jesus didn't erase my drive, it refined it. It redirected it. The goal isn't to prove myself anymore. The goal is to be faithful with what I've been given, my skills, my resources, my influence, and use them to love people and honor God. That's a definition of success no award can measure and no balance sheet can capture. And for the first time, it's a version of success that actually satisfies the soul. Looking back, I used to see failure as the enemy, an obstacle to be avoided at all costs. Every setback felt like a threat to my reputation, every misstep like a stain on my record. But following Jesus has taught me to see failure through an entirely different lens. It's not punishment, it's preparation. It's not evidence of weakness, it's an invitation to grow. I can think of dozens of times I've fallen short, rockets that exploded on the launch pad, products that flopped, ideas that never materialized. Each one used to haunt me, a painful reminder that I wasn't infallible. But now I see those moments differently. They were classrooms, each one teaching me something I couldn't have learned any other way. Humility, resilience, patience, dependence. Failure stripped away the illusion that I was in control and forced me to confront my limitations. And in those moments of brokenness, I discovered something powerful. God meets us there. He doesn't stand at a distance waiting for us to get it right. He steps into the wreckage with us, guiding us, shaping us, using even our worst mistakes to form something good. Sometimes failure redirected me away from projects that weren't meant to succeed. Other times, it deepened my empathy for those who were struggling. And almost always, it reminded me that my identity isn't tied to outcomes. I am loved and valued not because of what I accomplish, but because of who I belong to. That truth has given me a kind of courage I never had before. I'm no longer afraid to take risks, because I know that even if I fail, I'll learn. I'm no longer ashamed of my mistakes, because I know they're part of the story God is writing. And I'm no longer obsessed with perfection, because I know that growth, not flawless execution, is what matters most. Failure used to be the thing I feared most. Now, it's one of the ways I see God's hand most clearly. Every setback, every disappointment, every closed door has become a stepping stone, leading me closer to the person I was always meant to be. One of the most surprising changes that came after I started following Jesus wasn't about technology, ambition, or even purpose. It was about people. Before, relationships were often just a means to an end. I wouldn't have admitted it at the time, but deep down, many of my interactions were transactional. I valued people for their skills, their ideas, their ability to help move a vision forward. If someone couldn't contribute to the mission, I didn't see the point of investing much time in them. It wasn't cruelty. It was efficiency. But Jesus doesn't see people that way. He never did. And slowly, I started to realize I couldn't either. The same presence that had met me in the silence began to challenge me in the noise of everyday life. Do you see them the way I see them? It started small, pausing long enough to really listen in meetings, remembering details about someone's family, asking how they were doing, and actually caring about the answer. But it grew deeper. I began to see colleagues, employees, even critics as human beings first, not tools or obstacles. Their worth wasn't tied to their productivity. Their value wasn't measured by what they could do for me. They mattered simply because they were people loved by the same God who loved me. That realization changed how I led. Leadership stopped being about getting people to follow my vision and became about serving their growth. It wasn't just about building companies anymore. It was about building people. And it wasn't easy. There were relationships I had neglected, bridges I had burned, people I had hurt in my relentless pursuit of progress. One of the hardest parts of this journey was going back to seek forgiveness, not as a public gesture, but as a deeply personal one. I learned that humility heals in ways pride never can, and as I started repairing those relationships, something beautiful happened. The trust that grew was deeper, the connections more authentic, the work more meaningful. Love turned what used to be transactions into true relationships, and it transformed the way I move through the world. It's no longer about how people can serve my goals. It's about how I can serve them. For most of my life, my ambitions stretched beyond the atmosphere. I wanted to build rockets that could take humanity to Mars, machines that could think, systems that could transform how we power our civilization. And in many ways, that hasn't changed. The goals are still there. The drive is still real. But now, the reason behind it all is completely different. Before, space was an escape. It was humanity's backup plan, a way to ensure our survival if Earth failed us. AI was a challenge, a puzzle to solve, a frontier to conquer. Renewable energy was a race. a competition to see who could change the world fastest. But now, I see these things not as trophies, but as tools. They're no longer about human glory, they're about divine purpose. The universe is vast, and exploring it is still one of humanity's greatest callings. But now, I understand that the goal isn't just to plant flags on distant worlds. It's to carry love with us wherever we go. It's to build communities on Mars that care for one another. It's to use artificial intelligence to serve, not replace, humanity, to extend compassion, not just computation. It's to power our world in a way that reflects stewardship of a creation entrusted to us, not exploitation of a resource we own. Following Jesus didn't shrink my vision, it expanded it. It reframed everything. Colonizing another planet is no longer just about survival. It's about creating a future where love and justice can flourish beyond Earth. Advancing technology is no longer about pushing human limits. It's about reflecting the limitless creativity of the one who made us. Even solving climate change isn't just a scientific imperative. It's an act of love for the generations who will inherit what we leave behind. The universe suddenly feels more sacred, more connected, more purposeful, and the work feels more meaningful than ever, because now it's not about proving what humanity can do. It's about showing the universe what love looks like when humanity is guided by something, by someone, greater than itself. People often assume that following Jesus is a single, dramatic decision, a one-time moment where everything changes forever. And in a way, that's true. There was a moment when I decided to surrender my life to Him. But what I've learned since then is that surrender isn't something you do once. It's something you do every single day. It's in the quiet mornings before the world wakes up, when I choose to start my day with prayer instead of a meeting. It's in the moments of uncertainty, when I pause to seek God's wisdom before making a major decision, even if the data seems clear. It's in the discipline of reading Scripture, not as a checklist item, but as a lifeline, a way to stay grounded in truth when everything around me is constantly shifting. At first, these practices felt foreign, almost inefficient. I was used to solving problems with speed and precision, to relying on intellect and strategy. Waiting on God felt like standing still when I was wired to run. But slowly, I began to understand that patience isn't passivity, it's trust. It's choosing to believe that God's timing is better than my own, that sometimes the greatest breakthroughs happen not when I accelerate, but when I wait. There have been moments when opportunities slipped through my fingers because I felt prompted to wait, and later I saw why, because something better was coming, or because the timing wasn't right yet. That's the thing about surrender. It often doesn't make sense until you're on the other side of it. I still dream big. I still plan and innovate and pursue bold ideas. But there's a new humility woven into all of it. I no longer see myself as the CEO of my life, orchestrating every outcome. I'm more like a steward now, entrusted with resources, influence, and opportunities, but always aware that they're not truly mine. And that awareness has brought a peace I never had before. The pressure to control everything is gone. The need to have all the answers has faded. My job is no longer to make everything happen. It's to walk faithfully each day, trusting that God will take care of the rest. If you had asked me years ago what I wanted my legacy to be, I would have given you a list of achievements: colonies on Mars, breakthroughs in AI, a fully sustainable planet. I would have talked about advancing humanity, reshaping the future, pushing the boundaries of what's possible. And while those goals are still meaningful, they're no longer the foundation of my life, because now I understand something I didn't before. None of that matters if it's not built on love. The most important thing I can leave behind isn't technology, it's transformation. It's not infrastructure, it's impact on human hearts. It's not monuments to human brilliance, it's lives touched, people loved, souls changed. When I look back over my journey, I see a man who chased everything the world said would make him happy, only to find it empty. But I also see a God who never stopped pursuing me, patiently waiting for the moment I'd realize that true life isn't found in achievement. It's found in Him. And that's the invitation I want to leave you with. If you felt that same emptiness, that quiet ache that no amount of success seems to fill, you're not alone, and it's not too late to start over. No matter how far you've gone down a certain path, no matter how many mistakes you've made or how many achievements you've stacked up, you can make the same decision I did, to leave your old life behind and follow Jesus. I won't lie to you. It's not easy. It will cost you something, but everything you give up will be replaced with something far greater. peace that doesn't depend on circumstances, purpose that outlives you, and a love that will never let you go. So if you're ready, you don't need the perfect words. You just need an honest heart. Something as simple as, God, I'm tired of doing this on my own. I want to know you. I want the life only you can give. That's where everything changes. Leaving my old life behind wasn't losing. It was finally living. And my prayer is that you'll discover that same life too, one surrendered step at a time, and build a legacy that doesn't just reach for the stars, but points people to the one who made them. This story was intense, but my story on the right-hand side is even more insane.